All right, so we're diving into this beginner's Ukrainian grammar book, and as a language enthusiast, I'm sure you're eager to get beyond just the surface level stuff, right? So instead of just giving a dry textbook summary, we'll try to dig out the most interesting pieces for you.
Definitely. And you're right about this not being your typical grammar book.
Yeah.
Yeah. The author's personality really comes through. You know, in the intro, he even jokes about wishing people would buy it instead of just borrowing it from the library.
I love that.
It's like he's got this great sense of humor about it, but at the same time, you can tell he's deeply passionate about Ukrainian.
It's that perfect balance, right? Keeps things engaging.
Exactly. And it's not just the humor. He makes all these fascinating connections to other languages throughout the book, especially Russian and Japanese.
Oh, that's interesting. I noticed that too. He even called this a manner book, right?
Yeah.
Almost like saying, hey, this is how I approach teaching Ukrainian.
Yes. And it makes you wonder if he was influenced by Japanese teaching styles or something.
Right. And that whole comparison thing is super cool. For example, when he's explaining the Ukrainian and sound, he's like, it's similar to the Russian pronunciation, but clearer, and for the love of all that is good, never say it like the English I.
Right.
And then he goes on to say, it's exactly how you pronounce the Japanese character for I.
That's so helpful, though, especially for someone who might already have a bit of Russian or Japanese under their belt.
Totally. It's like he's building these bridges between languages.
Exactly. And it's not just pronunciation either. He does the same thing with grammar. Like when he's explaining Ukrainian plurals, he compares it to the concept of formal and informal you in other languages.
Oh, yeah. I remember that part. That was really interesting. I always found that concept fascinating, how languages have different ways of saying you depending on your relationship with the person.
Right. Like in Spanish, you have tú for informal and usted for formal. And in Ukrainian, those plurals function in a similar way. The form of the plural can actually change based on how the word is being used in the sentence.
So it's not just about memorizing one plural form, but understanding the nuances of how it changes based on the situation.
Exactly. It's all about context. He gives a really clear example with the word for student. Depending on the context, the plural can mean to the students or about the students.
That is so cool. I never would have thought about it that way.
Yeah, it really highlights how subtle differences in grammar can have a big impact on meaning.
Absolutely. And it makes you realize how much attention to detail is involved in truly understanding a language.
For sure. And speaking of details, he doesn't just focus on the technical stuff. He also sprinkles in all these little cultural insights.
Like what?
Well, for example, he teaches the phrase "do pobachenja" for goodbye.
Yeah, I remember that.
But then he explains that it literally translates to "until we meet again."
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. It adds a whole new layer of meaning to a simple goodbye.
Right. It gives you a glimpse into the cultural values embedded in the language. It's not just about saying the words, it's about understanding the sentiment behind them.
Exactly. It's like those little cultural nuggets are what make language learning so rewarding.
Absolutely. And this book is full of them.
It really seems like he's thought carefully about what to include for a beginner audience. He even dedicates a good chunk to grammatical genders, which I know can be a bit of a stumbling block for native English speakers.
It's true. We don't really have grammatical genders in English, so it can be a new concept for learners, but it's essential in Ukrainian. It affects adjectives, pronouns, even verb endings.
Right. So he starts by explaining the three genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter.
Exactly. And he gives clear examples too, like father for masculine, mother for feminine, window for neuter, makes it easy to grasp the basic concept.
And he points out that for many nouns, you can often guess the gender just by looking at the word ending right.
Yeah. Like if a word ends in it's usually feminine. He even provides a handy little table summarizing these patterns.
Oh, that's helpful, especially for visual learners like me.
Right. It gives you something concrete to refer back to. But then he's also honest about the fact that there are exceptions.
Of course there are. It's language, after all. There are always exceptions.
Exactly. And he doesn't shy away from that. He's upfront about the fact that there will be times when the rules don't quite fit. But he promises to delve into those deeper in later lessons.
That's good to know. I like how he acknowledges the complexity but doesn't overwhelm you with it all at once.
Exactly. He's laying a solid foundation, but also leaving room for exploration later on.
Which is really how language learning should be, right? It's a journey of discovery.
Absolutely. You're constantly uncovering new layers and nuances.
And this book seems like a fantastic guide for that journey.
It really is amazing how much depth there is to even those grammar concepts you think would be pretty straightforward. Like, take how Ukrainian handles plurals, for example.
Oh, yeah. I was looking at that earlier. It's definitely not as simple as just tacking on an as like we do in English.
Not at all. He goes into detail about how those noun endings change in the plural, and masculine nouns are a whole thing.
I bet. Because masculine nouns already have like those different groups based on their endings, right?
Right, like he uses those masculine nouns ending in a consonant as an example, usually at B to form the plural. Makes sense, right?
Yeah. Seems pretty logical so far.
Okay. So then he brings up the word for student as an example, which ends in a consonant. So far, so good.
Okay.
But then, bam, he hits you with those exceptions where the ending of the noun completely transforms in the plural.
Oh, no. I knew there had to be a catch.
There's always a catch. He uses the word for museum to illustrate this. In the singular, it ends in E, but then in the plural, it becomes A. It's like the word just morphs into something totally new.
Whoa, that's kind of wild. It makes it tricky to just guess the plural form.
Exactly. You really have to pay attention to those patterns and genders as you learn new vocabulary. But he does reassure readers that it's not all about memorization.
Thank goodness. My brain can only handle so many grammar rules at once.
Totally. He emphasizes looking for patterns and understanding the logic behind those plural formations. It's like deciphering a code.
I like that. It makes it feel more like a game than a chore.
Right, and that's how he approaches a lot of the grammar explanations in this book, especially when he gets into those verb conjugations.
Oh, yeah. Those can be a bit of a beast in any language.
Tell me about it. But he breaks it down really well. He starts with the present tense, focusing on what he calls the first conjugation.
Okay, so it's like a logical starting point.
Exactly. And he uses the verb chaitaiti, which means to read, as his example.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
So he like goes through and shows how the ending changes depending on who's doing the reading.
Right. And he emphasizes that even though the emphasis might shift within the word, those endings stay consistent across all first conjugation verbs. It's like a reassuring constant.
It's like finding a familiar landmark in a new city.
Exactly. And he does the same thing with the verb sluhati, meaning to listen. Even though the stress falls on different syllables, those trusty endings remain the same.
So if you can get those first conjugation endings down, you're already well on your way.
Exactly. But he's also upfront about the fact that there's more to come. Like there are other conjugations beyond this first one.
Of course there are. This wouldn't be a deep dive without a little more complexity.
Exactly. But he doesn't leave you hanging. He promises to cover those other conjugations in later lessons. It's like a little grammar cliffhanger.
I love it. He's got me hooked on Ukrainian grammar now.
Mission accomplished.
Right.
But even within that first conjugation, he doesn't shy away from the variations. Like he introduces the verb pratsivati, which means to work.
Okay, and what's different about this one?
Well, it has a slightly different ending in its infinitive and present tense forms compared to sluhati. But apart from that little quirk, it follows the same conjugation pattern as sluhati for all its other forms.
So it's like he's saying, look, even within a seemingly rigid system, there's room for individuality.
Exactly. Each verb has its own personality, and then just when you think you're starting to get the hang of it, he throws in another curveball with the verb paisati, which means to write.
Oh boy, here we go again. What's special about this one?
This one's a first conjugation verb at its core, but it has a couple of unique twists in its present tense forms. Like the first person singular and the third person plural forms use a Y instead of an E at the end. It all comes down to those specific Ukrainian spelling rules.
Ah, yes, those spelling rules can make or break you. But it's good that he explains the reasoning behind it instead of just being like, oh, that's just how it is.
Exactly. He's all about empowering learners to understand the why behind the what.
Because rote memorization will only get you so far right.
Exactly. So then he introduces the second conjugation, and he starts with the verb pallidi, which means to smoke.
Okay. And I'm assuming this conjugation has its own set of rules and quirks.
You know it. And to illustrate the differences, he provides this handy table comparing the Ukrainian and Russian conjugations for pallidi side by side.
Oh, that's smart. Because even though they're related languages, seeing them laid out like that probably highlights the distinctions.
Right. It's like their own little linguistic dance-off. And he points out this one key difference with pallueta too. The accent actually shifts in some of the Ukrainian forms, unlike in Russian. And those subtle shifts can have a big impact on meaning and pronunciation.
It's a good reminder that even when languages share roots, they each have their own unique flavor. What other examples does he use for this second conjugation?
He brings up the verb vakati, which means to see. And this one doesn't have those shifting accents like palataiti, but he uses it to illustrate how sometimes what you see isn't always what you get.
Intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, he points out that even though at first glance the endings for bakateti might seem totally different from Slohati, it's actually just those Ukrainian spelling rules at play again.
It's like those optical illusions where you have to look closer to see the true picture.
Right. The patterns are there. You just have to know how to spot them. And he's really good at guiding you through that process. And just when you think you're getting comfortable, he introduces verbs like stoyati, which means to stand, and lezhati, meaning to lie.
Oh, and I remember these. They're not just about people standing or lying down right.
You got it. They can describe the position of objects, too. He gives this great example, tut stoyit niska, which means there's a book here, but because he uses stoyit, the verb to stand, we know the book is upright, not lying flat.
That's a really cool nuance.
Right. And he does the same thing with tut leshit niska, same translation. There is a book here, but leshit, meaning to lie, tells us it's lying flat.
So the choice of verb actually adds this visual element to the sentence.
Exactly. It paints a more precise picture in the listener's mind.
I love that. And it makes me wonder, like, are there other verbs like that in Ukrainian where they imply something about the spatial orientation of things?
Oh, I'm sure there are. And that's what makes this whole deep dive so exciting. There's always more to discover. But for now, let's get back to stoyati and lezheti. He also points out that the choice of preposition, either v or na, depends on the noun being described, not just whether it's inside of or on top of something.
So it's like those prepositions have their own set of relationships with the verbs and nouns.
Absolutely. It's like this intricate dance between words where each one influences the other.
Speaking of intricate dances, what about those perfective and imperfective verbs? I always find those tricky.
Ah, yes. The classic perfective versus imperfective debate. It's a grammar concept that we don't really have in English, so it can be tough to wrap your head around at first.
Can you refresh my memory on how that works in Ukrainian?
Sure. Basically, it affects how you describe whether an action has been completed or not.
And that influences which verb form you use.
Exactly. He uses the verb paisati, again, which we know means to write. Its perfective counterpart is napaisati. So if you wanted to say he wrote a letter, implying that he finished writing it, you'd use napaisati. But if you wanted to say he was writing a letter describing an ongoing action, you'd use paisati.
So it's about choosing the verb form that matches how you're viewing the action, whether it's completed or still in progress.
Yeah.
That's pretty nuanced.
Right. But it gives you that extra layer of precision in your communication. And he gives even more examples, like with kaitati, to read, and slahati, to listen, just to really hammer home that distinction.
It's like he's anticipating those moments where learners might get tripped up and providing those extra guideposts.
Exactly. He's building those bridges of understanding. And speaking of bridges, he doesn't just stop at the present tense. He dives headfirst into how Ukrainians form the future tense.
Oh, and is it similar to those present tense conjugations we talked about?
It's actually quite different. In Ukrainian, you form the future tense by combining the future tense form of beauty, the verb to be, with the infinitive of the main verb you want to use.
Oh, so it's like you're building the future tense from separate pieces.
Exactly. Like to say, I will write this letter, you'd say, ya budu pisati silis. You've got the future tense of beauty combined with the infinitive form of to write.
That is so cool. It's like linguistic Lego.
I love that analogy. And those future tense forms of beauty are pretty versatile, too. He explains that they can even stand alone in sentences like, I will be at home.
So it's not just a helper verb, it can be the star of the show, too.
Exactly. And it's all about understanding those different contexts and how the pieces fit together.
It really highlights the elegance and flexibility of Ukrainian grammar. And this whole approach of explaining the logic behind the grammar rules, it's just so refreshing.
Right. He doesn't want you to just memorize the rules. He wants you to understand the why behind the what.
Because ultimately, that's what leads to true fluency.
Exactly. It's about being able to not just speak the language, but to think in it as well.
You know, it's amazing how even something like verb tenses, which we think of as like grammar 101, can have so much depth in another language.
It's true. It shows you how much thought goes into even those basic building blocks of communication. And speaking of building blocks, he doesn't neglect those grammar details that tend to trip people up. You know, like those noun cases.
Oh, yeah, those can be a real headache for language learners, especially coming from English where we don't really have to deal with them.
Exactly. And he dedicates a good portion of the book to explaining how noun cases work in Ukrainian. He starts with the prepositional case.
Makes sense, since it's often used after a preposition.
Right. And he does a good job of breaking down like when and why you'd use it. He explains that there are patterns and rules to follow, which definitely helps make it feel less overwhelming.
It would be helpful to have an example, though. What's the situation where you'd use the prepositional case?
Okay, so picture this. You want to say, I work in the store in Ukrainian.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
So you'd say, Я працюю в магазині. Now, pay close attention to the word magazine, which means store.
Okay, a magazine?
When it comes after the preposition v, meaning in, it changes to magazini. That change in the noun ending, that's the prepositional case.
So it's not just the preposition itself doing the heavy lifting. The noun has to transform to fit the situation.
Exactly. It's a team effort. But of course, like with anything in grammar, there are always exceptions to the rule. He points out that you usually add an I to the end of the noun for the prepositional case. But there are some quirks depending on the noun itself.
Actually, there always are. So give me an example of one of those quirks.
Let's stick with our work scenario, but this time, instead of a store, it's a school.
Okay, so I'm guessing the word for school changes a bit differently.
Exactly. The sentence, Я працюю в школі, means I work in the school. But instead of adding an I to школа, which means school, it takes an I in the prepositional case.
It's like those tiny details that can really trip you up, especially when you're first starting out.
For sure. And it highlights the importance of paying attention not just to the general rules, but also to how individual words might behave differently. He even gets into those tricky consonant changes that can happen with certain nouns in the prepositional case, like the word biblioteca, meaning library.
Oh, I'm already nervous.
Get this. Ka changes to si in the prepositional case, like a whole new word.
It's amazing how much complexity is packed into these seemingly simple grammatical concepts.
Right, and he doesn't shy away from that complexity.
Yeah.
He even points out those gray areas in language where even native speakers might disagree on the correct way to say something.
Oh, I love when he does that. It reminds you that language isn't just about following rules, but about how people actually use it.
Exactly. And he uses the prepositions vi and na as a perfect example. They often both translate to in or at in English, right?
Right.
But choosing between them can be tricky even for native Ukrainian speakers. He brings up the word Ukraina for Ukraine, and there's actually ongoing debate about whether to use vi or na with it.
That is so interesting because it highlights how language is constantly evolving. It's not static.
Yeah.
There's always room for interpretation and debate.
Exactly. And I love how he isn't afraid to bring those linguistic debates into the learning process. It makes it feel more like a conversation than a lecture.
Absolutely. It reminds me of those aha moments we've talked about. Like when he breaks down the phrase "do pobachinja," he doesn't just give you the translation, he tells you what it really means.
Yes. It's so much more powerful to understand that do pobachinja means until we meet again. It adds this emotional depth to a simple goodbye.
It's those little cultural insights that really make language learning come alive.
I completely agree. It's about connecting with the heart and soul of a language, not just the words themselves.
And this author clearly understands that. He's crafted a grammar book that goes beyond the basics. It invites you to explore the nuances and the beauty of the Ukrainian language.
And his passion for the language is truly contagious. It's hard to imagine anyone reading this book and not feeling inspired to start their own Ukrainian journey.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been just a small taste of what this grammar book has to offer. If you're looking for a way to connect with Ukrainian culture and unlock a whole new world of expression, this book is a fantastic place to start.